Alright, let's talk about Djarin's ship. Not the Razor Crest, the new one, the N1. It's completely unnamed as of this moment, at least as far as I know. But honestly, before we can do that, we need to go talk about the base model so that you understand what's happened with it. So, back to the base model. 40 something years prior. It shows up in episode 1, The Phantom Menace. This is. If I have to explain that to someone, I'm sorry. Go watch the movies. Just, I understand it's episode 1. Suffer through it. Um, so, the N1 is designed as a security force ship, but it's effectively over engineered in a way. I wouldn't actually call it over engineered, more like very highly engineered, because it doesn't have any real fat on it. There's nothing about it that's really particularly bad, which is what you would expect in an over engineered craft. This one's just really heavily engineered to a very specific role, and that is a defensive interceptor. So, to that matter, it has twin engines. They're very powerful. Their job is to be fast and nimble. It sacrifices shielding for this. So, it does have shielding, but it isn't the best. At least not for Starfighter records. Um, in addition to that, it has twin blaster cannons front and center, right on its nose, and it also has a proton torpedo launcher beneath it. And that's got about 10 proton torpedoes. It's a good solid craft, mostly designed to stop light freighters, police work. Works well enough against lighter ships, but there's just not enough of them to do anything about an army, really. So that's where you see in episode 1 that the Naboo security force is pretty much just getting utterly demolished by one Lucrehulk's complement of droid starfighters. So it's good for security, but just never got the numbers to be useful in warfare. And that's really all. Now, fast forward 40 years. This ship's out of date. And even in Star Wars, where science advances fairly slowly, it still would have lost its edge. Effectively speaking, it would be down to probably average speed at that point. But in a ship that's light, meant to be an interceptor, average speed is bad because it doesn't have any of the survivability of a normal craft. You would want an X-Wing over it. And this brings us to Din Djarin's ship. When it gets rebuilt, it's built to just double down on everything about the N1. It goes full speed. It goes extra damage in the blaster cannons. So that's one of those where it's like, the cannons are bigger. Obviously, it's going to be putting out more power. But as we saw in the episode, they also went for every speed mod you could find, which means this is going to be an extremely nimble craft. It's going to be very difficult to hit, just solely based on its speed. By the time you line up, it's out of range. And then to add into that, it has more powerful blaster cannons to keep up with the time, so that it's able to do more attack runs, take out more or less any fighter just with the cannons. And that's great and all. And then they shoot torpedoes at a tie. We'll get to that in a minute, but for now, let's kind of move on from there. So this is pitched as his replacement for the Razor Crest. And it's pitched by a mechanic who's trying to sell a rust bucket in her shop, get it out of her shop, be done with it. And that's fine and all from the mechanic's perspective, but it doesn't make sense as to why Din would accept this offer. Because while we, from kind of a meta-narrative perspective, you kind of realize that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Din to go back to bounty hunting. There's the clan, there's trying to get everything back together. He's more than likely going to go into something that doesn't require him to be such a loner. That means a one-man starfighter is going to be perfectly fine. But at the same time, internal consistency and internal logic dictates that he would be searching for specifically a bounty hunting ship. And the N1 is utterly miserable at that. I'm sure it's been pointed out to death, but let me do it a little bit more. There's no way to really take a starship in space. with the N1. Even if you disable it properly. If that ship doesn't have a hangar, you can't board. Just flat out. What are you going to board with? Its canopy has to open up directly. Any docking port gets immediately mushed. Nothing's big enough to take the opening of the canopy. So you have to have a hangar deck, and anything with a hangar deck is going to have so many people sitting in that hangar deck ready to explode to pieces with local ordnance that you're not going to be able to land in the hangar deck. You don't have the survivability. Let's say you're just taking down ground bounties and you're just flying to the planet, landing, get the bounty, fly back. How many bounties can you take at once? One, maybe two. And you're real cramped doing it. So the entire thing with Din in the first, Din Djarin's first Razor Crest, and we see that he racks up bounties at a time. There's 5 or 6 in episode 1 just ready to go. But what's he going to do with this one? Not that. So it's just the internal logic of the story would have needed him to have a separate reason to be willing to take a Starfighter at that time, other than just the Razor Crest is gone. Because a bulk transport, like the worst bulk transport, would still be a better ship as a temporary one, solely because he can land, collect multiple bounties, and fly back. But, here we are. So, Din Djarin has a Starfighter. How does it hold up in the narrative after it's been added to his collection? How does this work? Does it hold up in the overall storyline? Does that make sense? Is it being a contributing factor, or is it being a detracting factor? Now, overall, I think it's a good contribution. I don't disagree with him having a Starfighter at this point. Even a single-seater, he's no longer going out just to do bounties. He's doing things for the clan, and they're getting into some really tight spots. So the Razor Crest, as fun as it is to have, is going to get shot down a lot easier. So, yeah, I don't mind that he has a Starfighter at this point. I do, however, mind how they keep using his Starfighter. So, in the first episode of Season 3, there is a dogfight between Din Djarin and the pirate Starfighter crew. Now, first off, I want to point out that Gorian Shard has an obscene number of fighters for the size of ship he has. But not relevant right now. It's just something to know. However, the dogfight, for the most part, I don't super mind. It's in an asteroid field. It relies upon, Din Djarin not being seen. And for the most part, he's basically just kind of picking off one or two at a time, using his agility to get out of their line of sight, out of their range, and keeping them on the pure defensive until it goes. He's got his chance to get on Vane on the final ship. But there is something that I dislike about it. It's a particularly one ship gets destroyed with a proton torpedo. And boy, that is just the indicator of things to come, isn't it? So, for reference, a proton torpedo is not rechargeable. It's not like laser blast. You only have so many of them. In record, the N1 can only hold 10. So you've got 10 shots of a consumable that you're going to have to buy again the minute you use it. And you're wasting it on a snub fighter without getting like a target lock or anything. This is just dead, just pure eyeballing that. And he fires a torpedo. Oh boy, that's an indicator of things to come. It only gets worse. So the next Starfighter dogfight we see is on Calavara. And I have far more issues with this one. So, first off, the first fighter Din Djarin takes out in this is a TIE Interceptor, where he waits to get lock-on in a head-on collision scenario using a proton torpedo. Good. Why would you wait for the lock-on? Just why? You're already going head-to-head with this dude. He's not going to turn. You're not going to turn. Just start opening up with cannons. The first person to land a shot is going to win. That's flat out, that's what it is. Why are you waiting on a torpedo? Second, you just fired a torpedo at the flimsiest craft in the galaxy. All versions of TIEs, other than like the Defender and the Phantom, take one hit and die. Just immediately. They do not survive. So why are you wasting a torpedo on this guy? There's no reason to wait for the lock-on. He's not strong enough to have shields to counter the, blaster cannons. So just shoot him with the cannons. Then, later on in the following thing, he catches up to Bo-Katan, who's got 3 interceptors on her tail, takes one out, and then pulls up alongside in a parallel flight plan with these guys. Instead of just staying on their tail and continuing to wreak havoc like a good wingman would, he just abandons the pursuit for no reason. People. So that brings us to our final to-date Starfighter dogfight with Din Djarin and the N1. And that is Episode 5, Chapter 21, The Pirate. And unless I'm mistaken, he doesn't fire a single proton torpedo here. Now, for everyone who's thinking, oh, that's an improvement, right? No, there is a Corsair right there. Perfect target for a torpedo run, and he shoots 0 torpedoes. None. So many Ys. Now, skipping over the extremely heavy plot armor of him not taking any real fire in that entire dogfight, despite being outnumbered 10-1, somebody should be landing some kind of hit on this guy, even if it doesn't take him out. But skipping over the plot armor, the absolute lack of just... Why are you only using cannons in this one? Yes, use cannons on the fighter. The dogfight, fine. Again, other than the plot armor of nobody hitting him hitting everyone else was perfectly reasonable. But then the Corsair. Why shoot 0 torpedoes at it? Torpedoes are designed to take out capital ships, corvettes, the big boys. That's their job. Why are you shooting none? Why are you only using your blaster cannons, which are anti-Starfighter weapons, against the Corvette-sized craft flying right there? This is my consistent beef with live-action Star Wars. It is so close to having the right idea. But it's as if live-action Star Wars doesn't understand war. And it's Star Wars. People, go watch Saving Private Ryan a few times. There are dogfight, movies you can watch. There's things you can research to learn how to have this work out properly. How are you so close to being good, Favreau? Is this having Kennedy on your team? Come on, man. Do better.